On short notice. Earlier today, State Comptroller Phil Degnan released his office's performance audit of the corporate tax breaks awarded by the New Jersey Economic Development Authority that I ordered when I signed Executive Order number 3 a few dozen ago, back on January 19th, 2018, which was my third day in office. The Comptroller's report confirms some of our worst suspicions that billions of dollars worth of state tax incentives were awarded by the Christie administration with little regard to oversight or transparency, and even less regard for making sure we actually got a return on the taxpayers' investment. Since 2005, and the scope of this report, in fact, goes back to 2005, New Jersey has given out nearly $11 billion in tax incentives, ostensibly for companies to either create or retain jobs here in New Jersey. $8 billion of that amount was under Governor Christie's watch. One would hope that such a huge number would come with an equal level of internal controls designed to ensure that applicants lived up to their claims. We now know that they did not. The Comptroller's audit has highlighted that EDA's incentive programs were vastly deficient in numerous areas. The audit uncovered inadequate monitoring and oversight with non-existent policies and procedures that stifled accountability and even led to the failure of appropriate application fees from ever being collected. The lack of policies and procedures included those that allowed for companies that received tax breaks to inaccurately represent their performance to EDA, other state and local officials, and most importantly, to New Jersey's taxpayers. Company claims were taken at face value and never independently verified, leading to sometimes overstated awards. The lack of internal controls also meant that EDA couldn't even ensure that these companies were living up to their promises. For example, no effort was made to measure an awardee's baseline employment, a critical metric when someone is asking for a tax break for creating new jobs or even retaining current ones. The Comptroller's report even found that some awardees would wait until the very end of the annual reporting period, including in some cases within just the last 2 weeks, to hire the minimum number of new employees needed to stay in compliance. As a result of this and other deficiencies, the Comptroller's audit cannot substantiate that nearly 3,000 reported jobs out of a sample of just 15,000, 1 in 5, were ever created. I said sample, and this is an important point. Because of the complexities associated with the required analysis to do this audit thoroughly and properly, less than 10% of the total awarded projects were sampled. We can assume, therefore, the shortfall in job creation was of an enormous scale. Again, if you look at the report, there were 401 projects in total, 37 of which were sampled. And in those 37 sample projects, 3,000 of the purported 15,000 jobs that were to have been created could not be found. The entire amount of jobs purportedly created, and I say purportedly created, in those 401 projects by reference is 240,000. So if that 20% held, and I have no basis upon which to assess that, my gut tells me it may be even worse, but that would mean of the 240,000, 20% of that is 48,000 jobs, if you extrapolate that sample, as many as 48,000 jobs may not have, in fact, been created or retained. And these examples are just a few. The ones I've given you are just a few of the most egregious shortcomings. Now, let me be very clear on this. The tax incentives play a role in smart economic development, but they are but one element of a broader strategy. That strategy includes workforce development. It includes investing in education at all levels. It includes investing in infrastructure, and in particular transit at all levels. But when economic incentives are used, they must be forward-looking, they must be precise, they must pass the Wayne Gretzky test of why are you so good? Because you go to where the puck is headed. So to high wage growth, high value-added sectors, as we have laid out in our economic plan. But they also must be handed out responsibly and with the knowledge of both parties that someone is watching to make sure promises made are promises kept. By the end of the last administration, we were giving out corporate tax incentives to the tune of more than $160,000 per job claimed to have been created or retained. Again, it wasn't an element in the toolbox. It wasn't one tool in a broader economic development strategy. It was the entire strategy. And that, even if it's properly monitored, and it clearly wasn't, is a recipe for failure. And now we know, based on this report, that potentially 1 in 5 jobs, and possibly more, we have no reason to know, that money just flowed from taxpayers' pockets into a black hole. $11 billion with a B. For the same price as these tax breaks, we could have rebuilt the entire Portal Bridge on our own 7 times. In fact, we could have practically built the entire length of the Gateway Tunnel over the same time period that the Arc Tunnel was supposed to have been constructed. $11 billion. The Comptroller's report contains a list of needed reforms for bringing oversight up to a necessary level. And I look forward, and we look forward to working with the EDA's Executive Director, Tim Sullivan, and his leadership team to see that they are implemented. Indeed, Tim and his team have already taken important steps even before knowing of the audit's devastating results. Many, many questions remain unanswered, and we will review all of our options. After all, the public has a right to a full accounting as to why jobs that were promised were not created, and yet public money was still spent. But the best reform measure would be to let these programs expire in ignominy this July and replace them with an entirely new set of programs that have accountability and responsibility written into them. We put forward the vision for such a program when we unveiled our economic master plan in October. A program, by the way, that is capped, has clear eligibility criteria, has flexibility, and works to our broader economic goals. We must have a program that is strategic and smart. In other words, the exact opposite of what we got. And I am more than ready to work with the legislature to get such a program passed. I'm proud. My colleagues could tell me if my dates are wrong, but before the holidays, in fact, we sent over bills that we have drafted that underpin this economic master program. I'm also proud to say that even before seeing this audit, which obviously we've just seen as you all have, that a lot of the elements in terms of monitoring and vigilance were already envisioned and included in what we've written. We're clearly going to review what we've sent over to make sure that we have as robust a set of programs as possible. Again, I want to thank Comptroller Degnan and his team for their work. Our task now is to prove to the taxpayers of New Jersey that we have learned from that work. And with that, I'm delighted to take a few questions. Please.
Governor, did the results of this audit disturb you enough to seek resignations from and replacements for members of the EDA board appointed by previous governors?
I have no real comment or reaction to that. We just got this ourselves. As I mentioned, all options are on the table. There's sort of two reactions that I have to this, and this is really implicit in what I've already said, so I don't want to belabor it. Number one, as these programs expire and we write with the legislature the next generation, let's learn from our past mistakes. Let's go to where the puck is going. Let's focus on high growth, high wage sectors. Let's make sure we have a robust monitoring system in place, that taxpayers get back what they deserve, and importantly, that while tax incentives are part of the next generation, they are one tool in a broader toolbox. And the broader toolbox is all about rebuilding the middle class in this state, investing in education, transit, to pick two big initiatives. But at the same time, we can't leave this where it is. And so I don't have a specific answer, but we ain't going to rest until we know where every single penny went. And again, for the corporate players who play by the rules, who do what they claim that they will do, this state has the welcome mat out. We want folks like that here, and I suspect the overwhelming majority of the players are exactly in that category. But we will not rest until we understand where every single taxpayer dollar went. Please.
Governor, have you analyzed whether your administration has any legal grounds to pursue reclaiming some of this revenue that went out to the companies?
Needless to say, it's too early for me to say this because we just got a short heads up on this, the audit results before you all did. But if we do have that, I'm not a lawyer, but if we do have grounds to reclaim, we will aggressively pursue those.
And as a follow-up, there's been a lot of discussion from down the street about affordability and whether or not things like public employee benefits can be afforded in this state. Can you talk about sort of the moral high ground that exists here? Some of the same lawmakers who talk about those issues have been involved in the creation of these programs that were picked apart in this audit. How does that play into that broader debate here in Trenton?
I mean, to be determined. I'm not going to take any high or low ground. I'm the chief executive officer of the state, and my job is to protect every penny of taxpayers' money. And I just look at $11 billion, and I look at the debates we have about funding public education, funding NJ Transit, funding the unmet health care needs in this state, reducing the burden of indebtedness that folks incur to go to college, the pension and health obligations, and I think and dream what we could have done with $11 billion that was well spent. I mentioned the Portal Bridge 7 times over, the Gateway Tunnel, almost the amount of money we're begging the Trump administration for, and all of the other mouths that we have to feed in this extraordinary state. It makes me incredibly angry. Please.
If I understand it correctly, a lot of the tax break revenue has not been fully realized at this point. So, even though there's been $11 billion, like not all of that has been realized by the companies. And do you have any sense at this point of how this will impact the budget in the coming years, or what are you going to be doing an analysis on what to expect in the coming years in terms of tax revenue if revenues are going to fall short?
So the next generation. Let me talk about something that is the future and nothing to do with what I've just discussed in this audit. The next generation of tax incentives are actually quite precise. They're in 5 categories. They're capped. They're very strategic, in my humble opinion. They're very targeted to where we want to take this economy. And we have written, as I mentioned, we sent over legislation across all 5 of those categories. We want to now look at them again to make sure that they're as robust as we want them to be, particularly on the monitoring side. But those are we want to be in discussions immediately with the legislature. They would be born as of July 1st next year. And there's a dollar amount associated with each one of them. I, in fact, have this probably somewhere here. Bear with me one second. So NJ Aspire, which is for a real estate development transit-oriented is $100 million in our proposals. There's a brownfield tax credit for 20. There's an evergreen investment fund, which we think is an incredibly important element to the prospective plan of $60 million. There is a corporate piece of this, which is capped, which is $200 million, and historic preservation, which is $20 million. As it relates to the audit and the carnage of the $11 billion that was spent, the answer is I don't know what its implications are going forward. There are requirements to achieve these, to earn these credits, and we're going to have to go through this, we're going to have to slog through these projects. There are 401 of them. I'm not sure exactly how that will take place, but we're going to turn over each and every one of them until we figure out where every last penny went. We'll go 1, 2 here, please.
Do you have a list of the companies that took advantage of this program and ways that they took advantage of it?
I do not have it as I stand here, but we know what the 401 projects are.
Can we make that public, or do you think they should be held accountable?
As I said, I would leave it, Dustin, that all options are on the table. It's too early to tell. But I think you should assume if you took taxpayers' money and you did not hold up your end of the bargain, that will have consequences, period. I don't know what they are yet, but they will. We cannot let that stand.
Is the EDA...
I'm not sure that's on, but I can hear you.
Is the EDA going to keep awarding tax breaks while you try to implement these reforms?
Listen, the great news is since we took over, the EDA has already gotten out ahead of this audit without knowing what the audit results are going to be. So they've already put in place a monitoring office which reports directly to the CEO. So the answer is yes, but it's going to be done the right way. It's going to be done where we know where every penny goes. We know exactly what got created or retained, and that's what we owe the taxpayers, and that's what we are, and we'll continue to deliver. Please.
Governor, so $11 million over 13 years, so a little less than $1 billion a year. Does that mean then that next year's budget there'll be $1 billion extra that the state won't?
Yeah, this is what we're living with, folks, which is why we can't leave this where it is. If it's about $1 billion a year, which is about what it is, that's what they call in the accounting business contra revenue. That's revenue that we don't have, that we should have. And it's one thing if you don't have it and you got something back for it. What this report screams out is we don't have it and we got nothing back. Not in every case. So how we figure out who did what here is to be determined, and I promise you, as we figure that out, we'll come back to you. But that is foregone revenue that we don't have, that we could use across any number of initiatives, almost all of which would be directed at investing in the middle class in the state and rebuilding it. And that's why we're not going to sleep until we figure out where every penny went. Please.
Governor, the EDA in the response letter, they said that less than $1 billion had been cashed for tax credits, closer to $700 million. So theoretically, state could award a lot less than the $11 billion, couldn't they? If the companies don't meet the
if the company doesn't meet the criteria, they don't get the tax break.
So it could be less.
Unfortunately, what you see in this report, a lot of the implication from the sample size is companies, more than we would like, did not meet the criteria and still got the tax break. So when you've got a sample size where you believe that 15,000 jobs should have been created, and you can't find 3,000 of them, 20% of the jobs, something is wrong, and we have to figure that out.
But it could be less than it could end up being less than the $11 billion that the state ends up actually giving out, couldn't they?
If we find out folks aren't meeting their criteria, they're not going to get the tax break, period. If that's what you mean, please.
Governor, just to piggyback on Joe's question earlier, is the administration considering suspending any of the current awards or grants?
I don't know enough yet to answer the question. If you mean the awards or grants that are being considered in our administration, we are, based on everything I know, very comfortable with the mentality, with the guardrails, with the monitoring, with the compliance around those incentives. As it relates to the purview of this audit, to be determined. As I mentioned earlier in my remarks, and I literally mean this, all options are on the table.
Let's do one more.
Please. Anybody over here? Okay, yes. Did someone else have their? I don't think you need the mic, by the way, unless you. If Charlie gets the mic, I'm fearful we'll be here all afternoon.
I'll keep it short. This is an off-topic
Happy New
question. Yesterday's hearing on the whole Katie Brennan matter and personnel issues, there seemed to be a recurrent theme that nobody seemed to be taking any responsibility. There were no follow-ups. And more precisely, a lot of legislators seemed puzzled that nobody stepped forward to alert you personally about this potential problem. Do you feel let down by your staff? And what's your reaction to that recurrent theme that this is, that ate up most of yesterday? I've never had a microphone.
By the way, Matt, we'll do one more if you all have a minute. I really have nothing new to offer on this, Charlie. I mean, we put processes in place that I respect, one of which has come to conclusion with the Attorney General. There's an investigation, what went wrong. There is an assessment and review of the state policies. We respect the legislative process. We've been cooperating to the fullest extent. As long as that process does not get political, as long as it's a whole-of-government approach, as long as it's survivor-centric, we're going to continue to cooperate, and I'll leave it there. Please.
Just one last question. So
Catherine.
it was in the Star Ledger a few days ago that, I think it was in Tom Moran's column, that you had been, sources were telling him that you had been soliciting money for New Direction, New Jersey. Is that true?
As of when? The soliciting money for New Direction, New Jersey
Correct,
in
yeah.
my life? Yes.
As you were governor? While
Yes.
you were governor? You have been?
Yes.
Is that, do you think that's kosher?
It's kosher under the laws, absolutely. I also said yesterday, and I was happy to see the Senate President come to the same conclusion today, that I hope organizations like that disclose their donors, and I stand for and I'm supporting laws that make sure that happens. Citizens United, I think, was one of the worst political campaign finance reform-related decisions ever in the history of our Supreme Court. My gut tells me that there's no appetite at the Supreme Court to undo that. That doesn't mean we can't have better laws in New Jersey, and I want to stand on behalf of that. That organizations like that, I mentioned this to Matt yesterday, should not have the option to not disclose. I think the Senate President said something to that effect earlier, and I look forward to working with the legislature to achieve that. We will be back. I've said many times in these comments that all options are on the table. As we figure out what those options are, I promise you we'll come back to you. You'll forgive me just given how fresh this is off the press that we don't know what all those options are. But I promise you we will not sleep until we figure out where every penny went. Thank you all very much.